Welcome, Floodlight users. Thank you for coming today. We're thrilled to have some of you back and some new faces too. Today we are going to have some fun. We're going to tell each other our stories, and so this is going to be a relaxed way of sharing important information and kind of practicing some storytelling and giving each other some feedback. So we want you all to feel very comfortable about it. We're going to be in this room telling stories first, and then we'll share some refreshments afterwards. I started out without even reminding you who I am. For those of you who are new, I'm Laura Frank. I'm the executive director of iNews, and we are storytellers at the very heart of things. So my colleague, Daniel Brisson, will tell us a little bit about how we're going to work this in a minute, but we'd like to just start out going around the room and have you tell who you are and what organization you're from. And did you want to say something?
I would just introduce myself.
Oh, yes.
Even though you already have. So I'm Daniel Brisson. I'm from the University of Denver.
Okay. Hi, my name is Velia Munoz, and I'm interning with the Denver Foundation this summer.
I'm Susan Jensen. I'm with DAVA, Downtown Aurora Visual Arts in Northern Aurora.
I'm Stuart Steers. I'm the Development Director for Focus Points Family Resource Center.
My name is Liliana Flores Amaro, and I am the Technical Assistance Consultant for the Denver Early Childhood Council.
My name is Vicki Berkeley, and I work at the Colorado Center for Community Development at UC Denver.
I'm Ron Washington. I'm with the Fields Foundation. I'm the community organizer and the director of media.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Weiss. I'm with the Conflict Center. I'm the manager of fund development.
I'm Lynn Montague-Klaus. I'm with Metro Volunteers and a member of the Northeast Denver Children's Collaborative.
My name is Kobe Gould. I'm the executive director of the Grow House.
My name is Angie Campos, and I'm with the Grow House as well.
Mi nombre es María Elena Campos y estoy con Grow House.
Thank you all for coming. So today, like Laura said, our focus is on your stories. And for those of you who were at the first training, you remember that we went through a lot of details of identifying an issue. And maybe we didn't get as much time to share our stories. And so today, we really quickly want to turn it over to you and hear your stories. And the way we're going to do that is in the format of story circles. So how many of you have used story circles before in your work? No? A long time ago. So I'm a professor in social work at the University of Denver, and I teach classes in community practice. And a common technique we use to bring community groups together are to use story circles. And the idea is just to share a story, to share our issues. No pressure about doing it right or wrong. You got your story correct, incorrect. It's just a way for you to get your details out. And we asked you all to prepare kind of a 5-minute story. So condense your story. Think about what's important there and what you can tell. And we want to hear those stories. And then we want to offer just a little feedback. And the idea behind this story circle is to build some community so that we contribute to each other's stories. We recognize that we're part of a larger community here, and a community of Floodlight users, a community of this tool that you keep hearing about, where we can contribute and comment on and use each other's stories, use each other's data, use the techniques that each other are using to help us tell our stories better and to help us make real change in the community. So just a couple of ground rules for the stories. You each have, this is just simply a time thing. We want you to tell your story. Well, it's not simply a time thing. We want you to tell your story in 5 minutes, and one reason is because we're short on time. But a second reason is so that you focus on just those important details. So while someone's telling a story, please, let's just listen to the story. All right, let's give that person the center stage. Actually, we're going to ask you to come up front here and talk. Then second is let's validate each other's stories, right? Someone might not have the exact same story as you or the same perspective as you, but that's still a valid story. Let's practice listening and hearing. And then finally offering feedback. At the end of each story, we will have just 2 or 3 minutes to offer feedback, but let's save that until we've heard everyone's story. So one more thing I have my timer here, and this is just simply to get the pressure off of me so I don't have to be the bad guy keeping your 5 minutes. So I'm just going to ask each of you next to just take a turn whenever you feel comfortable, and not each of you, but each organization. If you're representing an organization, only one person from the organization needs to come up and tell the story. But I'm going to keep time, and in about 4 minutes, I'm going to turn that timer around so you can see, okay, I have just a minute left to finish telling my story and try to wrap it up. So that's what I have. I really want to turn it over to you. Do you have any questions for me or Laura about this training, about what you're doing here, why this is so weird, and I'm with a bunch of people I've never met and I have to tell my story? Do you have questions like that?
My question is really more about the purpose of the storytelling. And this is part of your research, and I'm assuming also it's to provide some coaching for us to tell our story about our organization. Am I even close?
What's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is a training for a web-based tool called Floodlight that's being developed by the Piton Foundation and the Denver Foundation. And they have gotten some grant money to develop this fairly technical tool, this user-friendly tool that can produce your story on the web and will be able to help you shape your story so that you can get it to other constituent groups, so that you can get it to policymakers, so that you can get it to your stakeholders, community members, so you can spread your story fairly easily. And so this training is set up really for you all. It's set up so that you can use this tool. And I understand it might be confusing. You've never seen this tool. You just keep hearing this thing, Floodlight. Actually, we're really close to having a prototype available on the web that you'll be able to see. In fact, at the next training, I think you'll see finally this tool. So really, this isn't part of my research or Laura's agenda. In fact, I don't have any stake in getting something from you, other than I think Denver's a vibrant place, and I believe in connecting people, and one of the ways of connecting people is helping them tell stories. I guess connected to this is, why is this so weird that we're talking on mics and there's cameras flashing on us all the time? Do we never address that really with you? So the point of this is, the point of the cameras and the mics are, you all are the initial Floodlight users. And we hope that this tool expands and that people all over the metro area, and really all over the state, and maybe all over the country, are using this tool to tell their stories and connecting stories to each other. And the filming is a way to capture some initial training, so that after this we can show interested users clips and trainings based on what we've done here, and we can hopefully maybe even use some of you to help other people learn how to use these tools and how to tell your stories. So we're filming just simply to be able to train other people how to do exactly what you're learning to do. Yeah?
So then the Floodlight is like one website where someone can go and view all these, or it's on our websites and they connect to it, or
it's a website that you would go to, floodlightproject.org.
Okay.
And you would go and upload your stories, upload your data, go through a tutorial on how to tell your story, and your story would exist there, and people could comment on your story and connect to your story and say, hey, look at our story, it seems just like yours, even though we're working in Southwest Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions, please. This session is really for you all.
So I guess my question is, are we telling the story of the organization, or our own personal story, or our personal story as it relates to the organization?
Yeah, I guess an assumption is that there's some important story to tell with your organization or community group. the great work you do in your organization, the problems you're having, connecting to community members, the successes you're having, reaching people with your services that haven't been reached before. Whatever that story is, that's the story that we'd like to hear today. So we really don't, I don't mean to make any judgment. I don't have any intention of making any judgment about your stories. We want to hear what you think it is. But it's not just, I'm Daniel Brisson and I'm from Long Island and on and on. It's something probably about Grow House or the importance of food and food security, you know, in the case of Grow House. Does that make sense? Is that a little more clear? Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Is it also then, do I need this?
So we said that was the weird part, right? So now we'll all just be
Am I
weird
being
and pass the mic
recorded,
on.
so I must speak into the microphone? Okay. So for those that are individuals that maybe work with an organization or are partnering or collaborating with an organization,
Yeah.
is that more a personal editorial of, this happened to me, and in order to rise above, I became engaged by doing this, that, or the other?
That sounds like
Is that a
sounds
way?
like a moving story to me. Like I said, I don't know what the right story is, you know, and maybe the story you tell today won't ultimately be the story that you first decide to tell on Floodlight, or maybe you'll tell 5 different stories on Floodlight.
And so the overall point and purpose is to build community in that sense of, I'm not alone, our organization is not alone, there are other people throughout the world that are facing these same challenges, or sharing success stories may help us to find a stepping stone that would ordinarily be a stumbling block, and really build that sense of engagement and community cohesion through
Would you like
this
to run the
channel.
train? That'd be fine, Melissa. That sounds perfect. Yeah,
Is that just the overall
I think
goal
so.
of-
I think in my mind, I think many of you might have different goals. In my mind, yeah, absolutely, I think that's one of the goals. In my mind, there's another goal too, which is a way to, a Floodlight would provide you a way to formalize your story where it might have just been kept informal, right? And I can pass this on to a policymaker, for example, right? Or to the principal at the school, or to a funder. Oh, let me deliver this grant application to you, plus this 10-minute story with videos and interviews that we've put together. Look at how professional and strong we are. Look at the difference we're making. Help us leverage that and make this even bigger.
Usually, I try to say a story is what inspired you to begin your journey. And if you can document that and express it, that develops your story.
Mm-hmm.
It's one way to look at it.
I just wanted, sure, yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Maisha Pollard, and I am the executive director for the Fields Foundation. And I also work with the Piton Foundation as well. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we've used storytelling in our organization. We are an organization that works in Original Aurora, and so we work specifically from Yosemite and Colfax to Colfax and Chambers, and then Chambers all the way to about Mississippi and Mississippi to Havana, on into Dayton. And we noticed that when we were advocating for children who are low income, who go to a school district who isn't providing a quality education, just advocating for just, almost just to level the playing field, if you will. Going down to the Capitol, it was very difficult to talk to legislators by just giving them this one-page brief. It was almost as if we felt that they didn't listen to us, they didn't hear us. And so we gave some students some cameras, and we asked them to go into the community and just document what it's like for you to live off of Colfax, what it's like to live in the Children's Corridor. And we had about 80 kids, and they told their story, and we brought them in, and we did a screening for the city council members and the state legislators, and they left feeling impacted because all of a sudden it was real. It wasn't just breakfast, right? The breakfast program. It was this real child. And so that's how I think that we can use storytelling. And we're here because even more recently, we like to use storytelling to talk about the children who are participating in our program, how they were impacted by the most recent Century 31 murders. And so our students led the prayer vigil on Friday, and so they want to tell their stories of what it's been like for them to lose their friends. And so we like to use Floodlight to talk about what it's like to be a survivor, to be an Aurora survivor. And so that's what you're going to help us do, right, Laura?
Thanks.
I think that's absolutely, in fact, what she just did was a story. Did you feel how rapt we were as she was talking about that? Humans, as we said, have always communicated in this way, and we will all remember the story she just told, and I feel inspired by it, and I'm sure most of you do too. So should we get started?
Yeah, please. Frankly, I don't think we're going to have time to get to everyone. And we'll have another training, and please come, and we'll make some time then. But maybe we can just get started, and when you're feeling moved, come up to the
seat of honor.
The storytelling seat.
Who's brave enough to go first? But I think, what you said, what Melissa said a moment ago, these stories are things that we hope have impact in some way down the road. So Melissa's brave enough to go first. Very good. You'll be on that note.
Oh, okay. We're all mic'd up all around us. Great. Well, it's so good to be here with you. So many of you I recognize from a lot of community groups where we're always fighting for justice, for a cause that affects us personally, affects us locally, as well as most of these issues are global issues. Today, I'm going to take a personal story. In 2007, my grandmother became a victim, and her life was taken by her doctor. And this doctor had given her 52 different medications, 5 of which, when combined, had a lethal effect. And for our family, you can imagine we were also victimized, because death is a very tragic time, a very grief-stricken time, and so that's already hard enough. If you know somebody is passing away, you can prepare for it, but you're never really prepared for that moment when they take their last breath. But in this case, she was healthy, relatively healthy. I mean, went to the doctor to have her lungs checked out so she didn't develop pneumonia from a common cold, and she lost her life. And so it was very unexpected and tragic again for our family, and really the first time that we felt like, how is this possible? Like, how does this happen? When we go to a medical facility, we're expecting to be healed and treated, not killed. And so it was just a very trying time. Prior to that, about 6 months before that, she was in a facility, a hospital facility, with a hip replacement, and she unfortunately went through some terrible treatment there, and she said, I would rather die, like, I want to die, just take me out of this hospital, they're treating me so bad. Basically, our nurse had refractured her surgical hip by kneeling on top of her. My grandma was a tiny framed woman. She very seldom asked. She didn't want to bother anybody with her symptoms or her trouble, and so for her to say that they were treating her horrible to the point where she felt like she wanted to go home, or she didn't want to live anymore because she was in so much pain, that was very...
Her words were, take a gun and just shoot
me. Yeah, take a gun and just shoot me. My mother's here in the room, and I'm also speaking on her behalf and telling this story, and I know that she will find strength to tell the story in her own words as well. But in that time, she really felt like she wanted to develop some type of organization that would advocate for other people in her situation, because she really didn't want anybody to have to go through what she was experiencing. And so in that brief conversation, we sat there in the room, and my nephew was present there. He was just 5 years old, and so we included him in the conversation, and formed this little meeting and decided, hey, we need an organization to advocate. Again, tragically, because only 6 months after that, her life ended, we found it a very difficult time and had to go through the grief process and heal from that tragedy. And so slowly we were putting the organization together. And today where we are is that we still haven't, although we've met and formulated it, we do need to take a look at making the next steps in order to make this advocacy group real and effective for change in our community. And it brings me to today where our family, like we are Aurora, you are Aurora, like we are all Denver. I feel like it's so important because Aurora is my neighbor. I'm a Denver resident, but the tragedies in Aurora have really touched me. My cousin, her friend AJ, was one of the victims that was killed. And so it hit a little closer to home that I just met the young man, and really have felt just grief-stricken again for those families and for our community. And so along with the medical advocacy portion of our group, we are now planning on advocating through crisis management and advocating for others who face crisis, like our community and the victims of the Aurora Theater shooting. So there's a lot of work to be done. I know that some of you in this room work for healthcare justice, advocacy, advocating for the rights of people, and I think that's really important because each of us has a voice. I'm so happy that the Floodlight will allow us the opportunity to really develop our skills, to tell our story, to get the messages across, to speak for others, and to use our voice to truly advocate for all people, including ourselves. So thank you so much for listening. The organization is Thunder Lizards Advocacy Group. TLAG is, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and we'll have more to come soon for all of you. And if any of you are interested in serving on our board, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Eloquent, that was eloquent. Can we give her any feedback that might help in the storytelling process? Does anyone have any reaction that they want to share? I would just say it's such a personal story, and you told it with such emotion that, again, it's so effective. What else would we share with her?
Thank you.
Hi, Melissa. Vicki,
Hi.
I remember you from the...
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing well.
Live Well meeting.
Yes, at the Grow House.
Yes. The feedback I would have is, I was definitely moved by the tragedy, and then I think what really would have been great to hear is the name of the organization, but what you're doing to prevent this tragedy from happening again.
Thank you.
So maybe you're talking about a call to action at the end of the story. If we're talking about storytelling that has impact, then it may need to end with some sort of call to action. And you had a little bit of that if you're interested on our board, but maybe that's something she could really build up to this crescendo of, the reason I'm telling you this story is I want you to become involved.
I was really on the fly because we decided to add that piece with the crisis advocacy just this morning before we even came. Like, actually, I didn't know what we were doing today. I just was here. So, but I think my original story, with just the time constraint, my original story would have said more about advocating for patients, teaching them how to advocate for themselves, and really that call to action piece and telling people what they can do as individuals to get involved, and maybe what foundations can do to support the work that we're attempting to do.
Well, the good news
but
is
I appreciate that feedback.
You don't have to be perfect today. This is a process. So thank you.
Yes,
okay,
just jump in somewhere.
Who would like to be?
No, I'm not. I No.
I was wondering for the name of it.
My name is, with the name of the organization? There's actually, my mother had done some research and developed the name based on what a thunder lizard does. So that's where that came from.
So you may need to add that to your story.
Yes.
The meaning of that name.
So
All right.
that's also great feedback for the name. It does add a sense of curiosity.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who would like to follow Melissa? Who's ready to go next? Okay, I'm going to pick people if you don't volunteer. No, just kidding. Okay. Maybe just wait a second. Stuart would have said. Go ahead, Susan. Yes, that's great.
My name is Susan Jensen, and I'm the director of Downtown Aurora Visual Arts. We're located off the East Colfax corridor, one block south of East Colfax. And we're a community arts organization that engages probably 900 kids per year in free arts programming. When I came to DAVA 14 years ago, I really was not prepared to work with young people. I had always worked with adults, and I had just gotten out of graduate school. So 14 years ago, I was in my mid-40s, and when I first started working with kids, they said, "Oh, how old are you?" I said, "I'm 46," and they said, "Well, you're old enough to be our grandmother." And that was one of my first experiences working with adolescents. I have to say that I fell in love with adolescent kids. At DAVA, we see kids in free programs from preschool all the way through high school. But that initial summer was probably one of the tougher summers of my life because the facility was falling apart. There was crime along the Colfax corridor. The kids that were beginning to accept me as a teacher were hesitant and teenagers and so reluctant. And anyway, so we cobbled together sort of a teacher-mentor relationship, and I got to know this band of kids. There was Juvisela Gutierrez, there was Maya, there was Alberto Veronica, there was Junior Munoz. There was a whole pack of kids that I started to interact with on a daily basis because DAVA's open Monday through Friday year-round. And that's sort of where my story began with DAVA. I had no intention of staying there, and after 14 years, I'm still there because the stories of the children that we impact are so incredibly compelling. And I'm just going to tell you Alberto's story because he's still around after he's 25 and he was 11 when I met him. Alberto was a neighborhood kid who had heard on the television that you could make clay pots out of dirt in your backyard. There was a science guy on TV at the time that probably some people remember. I never saw him. And shortly thereafter, he walked into one of our studios. Well, he never left. He, at that point, began creating a series of pots, then a series of dragons, a series of snakes, a series of lizards. He attached to the clay medium very easily and with great ferocity, I have to say, for a young person. So over the years, he was just one of the kids who kind of stuck around and who we got to know because, again, unusually, he came absolutely every single day after school to our programs. So he started in the studio. He went into our job training programs for middle school youth. He went back into the studio to teach. He came back summer times to teach with us. And he became sort of a local celebrity, certainly among the kids who come to DAVA. And figure, again, we're seeing now 900 kids per year on site. And then one year, I remember Alberto walking down the hallway to my office with a piece of crumpled up paper in his pocket, which he pulled out and showed me. And he had gotten into the Kansas City Art Institute, which is one of the 5 top art schools in the country. And I think there was a shift at DAVA when Alberto went off to art school. Now, I should probably tell you that one of the most interesting aspects of the art programs that we offer is that they're solidly grounded in youth development. So we're just as interested in building kids' characters as we are in offering them art skills, and we find the two go hand in hand. But many of our students go on to careers in the health sciences. Many of them go on to teaching, to business. Alberto happened to be the one kid who went on to a career in the arts, and he graduated with his bachelor's 4 years later. Interestingly, for a clay guy, they kept him out of the clay studio. They locked him out of the clay studio, he told me, at Kansas City the first year so he could improve his drawing skills. Anyway, he came back 2 years later to Aurora to make a difference. And he has opened up his own clay studio down the street at Walt Weinberg's studio, another mentor in the neighborhood. And he applied for and was hired for a position at DAVA last year. So he both teaches and he is working in an administrative capacity. So he's learning sort of the business side of what we do as well. And I think that just in terms of the overall context of Northern Aurora, and certainly in view of last week's terrible killings, that what we see in Northern Aurora are some of the best in kids. We see kids who are coming from backgrounds that are not equal to their more affluent peers. They don't have after-school programs that are viable to a great extent, and their families certainly can't afford to send them to soccer teams and into dance lessons and a whole plethora of other activities that their more affluent peers may access. So for me, it's sort of a social justice issue here, folks, because I believe that all children deserve a safe, creative space, and that when you invest in children, you're not just investing in their creative capacity, but you're also investing in the future of your community, and they show us that over and over again. Oh, I'm over. Whoa. Anyway, that's enough. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
We're all wrapped in
Or Alberto's story.
Who has some good feedback?
Sure. Oh, well, I could sit down and get feedback.
Who has
I
some good
suppose.
feedback for Susan?
I obviously a great personal touch with the adolescent story, because if you've ever been around children, of course we could relate to their true honesty, and it just adds a nice touch. A lot of great personal testimony is very effective. Your own story about you didn't intend to stay, but you stayed. And then Alberto's story, just a great way. Maybe think of your ask. It was there, just a little, but
thank you.
Maybe just make that a little solid.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to present at a church this Sunday, and they're going to give us their offertory, and so I have to make an ask. So thank you very much.
And I did love the youth development component in that. I think that's definitely reason enough without the social justice, like you wanting to, for people to understand this is a social justice issue. We should be concerned about youth, and just that youth development piece, that character development piece was real important in hearing that. And definitely a great tagline with the safe creative space, believing that all children need, I don't know if that's your tagline officially, but it sounded like maybe that was, all children deserve a creative, safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
I grabbed the mic, but I do have some feedback, and it's part of the exercise you said to validate. DAVA is in Aurora, and it's in the community where is in the Aurora Children's Corridor, which is the area that the Fields Foundation has been doing our documentary. And part of that documentary, when the kids went out and did their photo voice, was Discover DAVA. And so we shot a lot of footage there, and part of that footage actually is in our documentary that we just published, this weekend? Recently, basically, a kind of preview of it. And it's getting ready to get some pretty big exposure worldwide.
Good.
And so it's an example of how the efforts of DAVA can get exposure. And part of it is part of the tragedy, because it put the eye on Aurora, and you're one of the programs, we're one of the programs that are doing things that do make a difference. And I'm sure Maisha will expand on that, but that's some validation there for you.
Yeah, I thought that was a wonderful story, and the only thing I would add, too, is the difference that it makes for children to have access to the creative arts. It's not, I think a lot of people think of it as just, a hobby, but it's a lot more than that. Mm-hmm. So the difference that it makes would be, I think that's another point to make, but yeah, great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I agree with Vicki. I would, he's so powerful as a character. Sometimes it's even more powerful. I suspect he probably had some hurdles that he overcame. Oh, yeah. If you might be able to give us a sense of that. Alberto was there. I love the way he came. And stories are very powerful when you can set up a conflict or a difficulty and then it gets resolved at the end. Did you hear us all kind of, when he got to go to college and when he came back? So you have a great resolution. You could probably strengthen the difficulty and the problem in the first place, and that really sets you up for the ask.
Okay,
again.
So my question is, in terms of Floodlight, then, can we substitute Alberto for me? I mean, can it be?
It can be, yes.
You know, I mean, yes. In my head, it's sort of my story, but then it multiplies into the kids' stories who actually have come.
Yes, and on Floodlight, you don't have a 5-minute restriction.
Yeah.
You tell a story with him being one of the features.
Oh, that would be great.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, Maisha.
We came by Dava last week, and we were there, and I just saw an overflow of children.
Yeah.
I saw an overflow of children, and I looked through the space, and you guys just got that brand new wing.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So I would say I would add that into your story about your successes. And one of the things that's in Aurora, that pocket area that you're in, it's a metropolis of children. You know, there's 5 different schools right over there. And so if you were able to get more funding, you would be able to expand even more.
Yes.
So when you say 900, I don't think people who are outside of our community really know what that means.
Yeah.
It's 900, but there's 900 more that really could be there.
Yeah.
Especially with the funding.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all very much for listening.
Okay, who would like to be next? Oh, Stuart raised his hand, so we're going to hold him to it. That's right. He's in the queue. Thank you.
Well, I also wasn't quite sure about what kind of stories you wanted, but I brought a story about one of our participants that I thought was interesting, so we'll see how it goes. But anyway, I'm Stuart Steers. I'm from Focus Points Family Resource Center, and our largest programs are adult education programs. And most of the people we serve are immigrants from foreign countries who are here learning English. And there's people that you see sometimes, you know, just in the building. And there's a woman that I noticed, an African woman named Alva, who's 26 years old, and she was just really friendly and always smiling and laughing. I kind of wondered, you know, she came in every day. She was obviously a very hardworking student. And I'm the development director, so I don't work direct, I'm not actually a teacher, but I wondered, well, who is Alva? You know, what is her story? So I was talking to one of the teachers, and she told me, and I thought it was pretty powerful. She came to the United States about 10 years ago when she was 16 years old. And she left Uganda because she was she was really fleeing her family. She was in a kind of a violent home life. She'd really never been to school. She'd always cared for the other children in her family, hadn't been able to go to school. She spoke some English, but she couldn't read or write. She was illiterate. Anyway, she met a group of people in Uganda who told her, well, we can take you to the United States, and we can give you papers and give you a job, and you know, everything will be a lot better. So why don't you come with us and go to the United States? And she said, sure thing, you know, I want out of here. Well, unfortunately, when she got to the United States, she realized that the papers were illegal and that the people had lied to her and that she was actually being trafficked. It was like human trafficking. And it was kind of like a criminal gang of a sort. And they took her, believe it or not, to southern Colorado, into the San Luis Valley, and put her to work in a sweatshop where she sewed all day. She did this like really meticulous sewing. It was very difficult on her eyes and everything, and it was a pretty grim atmosphere. They hardly paid her anything. You know, she was in a country she didn't know. She spoke some English, but not much. Had no friends or family here. when she, complained about the way she was being treated, they just threatened her and said, if you do anything, we'll get you deported, and we'll get you in lots of trouble. And she was really afraid of these people. So finally, one day, she decided that she just, she said, my life was so awful, I would cry and cry. I didn't know what to do. So she finally just decided to hell with it, and she just left the place she'd been. She snuck out, hitchhiked all the way to Denver, just to try to find somebody who might be able to help her. Wound up living in a shelter here in Denver, and then eventually she was hooked up to an organization called the Rocky Mountain Survivors Center, which unfortunately has closed, but for many years helped refugees who had experienced violence in their home countries. Well, anyway, Alva really started to turn her life around when she came to Denver. Through that group, she found a woman who agreed to be her sponsor, gave her a place to live, and she works now for that woman, helping her with her real estate business, like cleaning and helping to maintain houses. And then she decided she really wanted to learn how to read and write. So, because she would like to become an American citizen. She has refugee status, but her immigration status is a little bit up in the air, so she's trying to get that worked out. And that's what brought her into Focus Points, because we have a program called the Open Book Program, which serves people who read and write at very, very low levels or are completely illiterate. And there actually are very few programs in Metro Denver that serve people at that low level. Most of the literacy programs are just for people who are a little bit higher level. So anyway, Alva really distinguished herself right away. She came all the time. She was there for hours every day. She started studying, constantly, and her skill level started to rise really quickly. Within about, just within a couple months, she was already reading at a 4th grade level. And she's continued coming and studying really hard, and now she's studying algebra and math, and she can read at a high school level. So she still has a lot of struggles. She still has a lot of nightmares about everything she's been through, and you can imagine all the different things she's seen in her life. But her dream now, she says, is to go to college, and she eventually wants to work in either early childhood education or fashion design. And so she told me that she now loves to welcome other students into Focus Points and greet them and encourage them. She said, Focus Points has changed my life. For the first time, I have hope for the future. So that's my story.
Where should we start on that?
I just want to tell you, Stuart, very, very compelling. You tell a great story. I was just captured. So you tell it in a way, I don't know what part of it, but really bring us right in. Yeah.
Thank you.
What I also liked is the fact that you took somebody who was basically subliterate in many ways, and you started in one place and you took us all the way to the end, and it's an incredible story of success for her and also for your organization. Thank you.
I really liked how you included the reading levels and how she advanced through those. I think sometimes it's hard to say those specific kind of data points, and I think you included those really seamlessly, and it was really meaningful because you saw the progress that she made. So I really enjoyed that.
I think that's a great point, and one of the main keys that we want to leave you with through this process is really undergirding your story with strong data points. And maybe going back to what Melissa had said, getting right at the ask, what do we do with this information now that you've told us this story that's obviously going to stick with us? It's as if you've been yeah, right as a check. Stuart, it's as if you've been a professional storyteller before.
Yeah, imagine.
I worked with Stuart at the Rocky Mountain News. Fabulous storyteller.
Thank you for your story. It was a great story. I definitely didn't hear a definitive ask, so that's just something I would work on, putting it in there, once you've told that great story. I think there's a lot of keys in there, like the human trafficking element, just a great social justice issue, one that we overlook a lot, but we need to have a conversation about. And so I definitely would just work on framing a solid ask. Write us a check, support our work. And I did like how you utilized naming your programs within that, because I think I learned about obviously the open book program, and then the joint, you just said joint education program, so I was glad you gave an example of what that was.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible to start your story with your ask? Kind of say, you know, I mean, I don't know. Since we've all kind of come up with the ask issue, and since we're all on some level raising money here, can you start with, you know, I have a million stories, and this is why I do this work, and this is why I'm out developing, you know, resources for my organization, and then start it? Or is it got to be the other way around? You build the case and then you make the ask.
I think it's a great idea. I think sorry.
No, it's fine.
I think that's a great idea, Susan, like just being able to maybe say, today I'm going to tell you a story about Mary, and today I'm going to be asking you to take out your checkbook and write us a check for the great work that we do, and here's why. And then maybe telling the story, like just framing the ask up front, but then when you close, so please, we'd love to count on your support today. Take your checkbooks out and write a check to Thunder Lizards Advocacy Group.
Ask twice.
Just so because you're keeping it in their mind, like what were you asking for? Like,
I like that.
Yeah.
So I like how you say it. So it's an abstract. Do it as an abstract in the beginning.
It
then
sets
close
up the
it,
presentation, and then you
sum it up
reinforce it.
with the second.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that, is it?
Very
That's
good.
creative.
So do you all each?
That way they may write the check for each other's story.
Right.
Don't decide on the amount until you hear my story,
Yeah, the
right?
check will be bigger at the end of the story.
That's right. Okay. Who would like to go next? That was a terrific experience.
I'll go next. Okay, you have some questions on
Sure.
framing our story.
Yeah, and I think probably we have time for this and one more, so if you are like really itching to tell your story, please jump up there.
Well, my name, again, is Liliana Flores Amaron. I'm with the Denver Early Childhood Council. I've been with the council now for about a month and a half, so I'm kind of fairly new to the organization. But really, what the council is all about is to connect organizations, connect families, connect other agencies that are related to the early childhood education field, and really create a systems framework from which children are provided quality early learning. And so our story is a little bit harder to tell because we're not direct service providers. We don't have our own child care center. But what we do is we work with families and we work with providers to find different ways to help them improve the quality of services, the quality of education that they provide to families and children in Denver. And so one thing that we're really focused on is to ensure that caregivers, whoever that may be, whether that's the grandmother, the mother, the father, the neighbor, the friend, that they really see themselves as teachers and as educators, and that they understand the importance of early learning, but especially the quality of that early learning. So, childcare is not babysitting anymore. It's not, put on the TV and, sit on the couch for 8 hours while I go to work. That's not what it's about. It's about the critical and crucial brain development and educational development that our children have during those first critical years. And how can we best use ourselves, our neighbors, our family members, our teachers, our educators, to kind of fill that role and fill that gap for our children. And so, that's kind of where we're struggling with. We don't really have I mean, we do have, you know, connections and these stories, but we don't have them really collected anywhere. So we are a fairly new nonprofit. We're about a year and a half old. Previously, we were a council under the mayor's office and then have transitioned into our own independent 501c3. So some of the things we're wondering is, you know, how to frame our story through challenges and successes. You know, do we look at, you know, if there's a gap for children, or a gap of services for children in Denver? Just an overall general assessment of what families want for their children and what's available, and seeing the different ways that we can serve as connectors to kind of help fill those gaps. And then just being able to really document the ways that we're able to connect the dots within the system to really give providers and families what they need.
Okay. Who has some advice for how she might start to identify the things that she needs for a powerful story?
One of the things that I think would be really helpful for a lot of people, because I'm amazed at how many people don't know how important early childhood learning is.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those statistics about what happens with kids who enter kindergarten ready to learn, and the difference in graduation rates between kids who are and who aren't, to me is a great way to kind of start out your story in terms of why it's so critical.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And that was actually one of the questions we had too, was how do we make those statistics and those facts really you know, resonate with community members? Do we talk about school readiness? How do we talk about it? Do we talk about early learning? Do we talk about brain development? Do we talk about, you know, sort of what, I guess, finding different ways to resonate with different sort of sectors within our communities? Definitely.
Yeah, I almost wonder if you could tell two different stories of somebody a student that was ready and a student that maybe wasn't ready, and kind of where their lives are or have gone, and kind of show that, oh, here's what happens. Because then that's not just statistics, but it's the actual, here's what happens when. Right. And then, is the organization new or just?
No, the organization is not new. I think we're going on our, I could completely be misquoting this, but I think we've been around for at least 15 as a council under the mayor's office.
Okay.
And then, about a year and a half, you know, sort of on our own.
Right. So maybe what's important about, I don't know if being on your own now is an important part of the organization story, but I'm sure in the last year, kind of being on your own, there's been some interesting things that have happened just on that, you know, organizational level, kind of, and saying why that's happened and why you're kind of doing what you're doing and why that's so crucial as a way of moving forward. I'm kind of curious to know more about that story. So the story doesn't necessarily have to be like a person, but it could be, you know, why the organization's actions are critical.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point.
Or maybe even a transformation of how, like, your example about the TV, like you can't just pop the kid in front of the TV for 8 hours. Like, why? Because some people that they don't work with children, they don't have children, they may not have a way to relate to that. Like, well, why is that bad? You know, or like why they may not see the difference, the point, like why. So maybe just transforming that to just say why. And then I just have one comment, just overall, like you brought up something for me that is so important when storytelling or giving a speech, and something that we all have to work on. I work on this constantly, even though I talk a lot. The like, you know, really sometimes when we get nervous or we're thinking, I think it's important that your audience not always see that you're thinking of the next thing you're going to say, and that's part of practicing the message so it is smooth. And when you talk about your constituents, you aren't able to name all of them without a pause of, and so I think it's, and Liliana, I know you, you're a great speaker, you tell your story regardless of the organization you're representing, you do a great job. But that's just something to be mindful of for all of us, I think. And if you practice it, if you have somebody sit with you and then just count those grammatical pause statements,
How many times
then
can you say in 60 seconds?
it is important because you're really, I said it 18 times. Is that possible? But it's just something to be aware of. And the more you're aware of it, the better you do, so that those pauses aren't filled with those grammatical errors. So
thank you.
A great job.
Pardon me, I'm sure I have ADHD, I'm pretty sure. Because sometimes I'm listening to the story and then my brain just drifts off to my own little land. But I also think that you should mention the funding cuts. You know, make sure you mention funding that's being cut, be up on that type of issue, so that you can be able to go into your ask.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
That was a great addition. And I would maybe take us all back to what we talked about in the first round of these trainings, and that is really think about what question am I answering for people? What is my real focus? Why am I telling this story? So it goes back to the call to action in many cases that we've been talking about, or maybe the very heart of the issue, the question that you want people to know, and that helps you figure out what data do I need around this story? What human connection do I want to share that illustrates the story? And that will really help guide you. Let's do another one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I feel like this is a group meeting or something. Good afternoon. My name is Maisha Pollard, and I am the Executive Director of the Fields Foundation. And I'd like to tell you two stories. I'd like to tell you the story of a young man named Javad Marshall Fields, who was born in 1983. Javad was born in 1983, and he went to schools all his life in Aurora Public School. He graduated from Smoky Hill High School, and he played basketball there. And that was a big deal for Javad because he was short all his life. And I remember teasing him from a very young girl, you know, because that's what brothers and sisters do, is we tease each other about how short he was and how he could never play basketball. But in 1997, he called me, and I was up at Colorado State University, and he said, we made it to the championships. Colorado State made it to the championships, and it was like, nana, nana, boo, boo. And my brother and I were extremely close, so I came down, and I got to see him play on the varsity team for Smoky Hill High School. Javad later graduated, and he went to Colorado State University, same place I was. And it was funny when he was there because people said, I thought you've been here like for the past 4 years, because he was always up there with me. And unfortunately, he was up there 1 year, the same year I was, because it took me a little longer to graduate because I really enjoyed my college years. I went on to leave Colorado State, and Javad ended up falling in love with a young woman named Vivian Wolf. They ended up finishing school in 4 years. They graduated in May of 2004. They went away, and Javad had gotten a job in Virginia, and he was going to be a lobbyist. It's kind of ironic when I tell you the end of the story. And shortly after Javad got back, he had been threatened. And he was kind of like, why am I getting these threats? Because Javad really lived his life on campus. He was a very social butterfly. He was involved in a lot of different activities on campus. He was on the debate team. He was a mentor. He was just always involved in something. So he had actually forgotten about this trial. Well, a year before this, Javad had went to a concert in the park, in the Lowry Park. And at that park, some people were shot, and he was shot by a stray bullet. And even though he only saw someone drive away in a car, couldn't even identify the face of that individual, 30 days before he was set to testify in that court case, they gunned him down. They gunned him and Vivian down. And within the time period right before he was murdered, he was threatened. He was threatened on 3 different occasions. And one time, he was even approached and asked to not testify if they gave him $15,000. And he said no. And I remember my brother calling me, being at the dentist office and telling me, I've been threatened. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because it wasn't a part of my reality. I went to college. I met my husband in college. I went to graduate school. I had the ideal life. That's the way my mother raised us. And it's so easy to just think that you're doing the right thing. You're doing everything possible to help your children get this American dream. And there's someone on the other side of the tracks who's also planning for their kids to get the American dream. It's just in a different way. And we came to that very shocking fact when we sat through the court case, and we heard about how Robert Ray's mother, who was the one who murdered my brother, how she raised her son. It was quite different. They lived in a different part of Aurora, and they didn't have as much money, and they didn't have as much education. And they didn't have, all the preschool so important. What they did have was a legacy of making good money, $40,000 a month selling dope. 4 generations of it, in fact. They had learned how to survive and acquire the American dream illegally. And that's when we realized that our call to action, our story, is really about how do we strengthen families in Aurora, those that have it and those that don't. And so we seek to change that within Original Aurora. Right now, 1 in 3 girls is pregnant in our community, and we want Aurora Public Schools to have a teen clinic in their high schools. We want them to reinstate health in their curriculums. We want every child to have access to primary care from 0 to 18. We want kids to graduate. We want families to feel secure about where they live and to know that they have other options in life. That's our story. I have 5 minutes. I talk a lot too.
Great story. Thank you for sharing. One piece that I really appreciated was, saying you had 2 stories and telling the story of your brother, and then as you're telling it, we realized that it's your brother. So instead of it being 2 stories about somebody else, even though it's framed that way, we learned that it's really about you. I appreciated that. Obviously the time is short, but telling a little bit more of the story, maybe of the other person, would be helpful. But great story.
Yeah, very touching story. Thank you for sharing that. I think I'm still curious about what exactly is the Fields Foundation. And, I'm assuming that the foundation came out of this incident.
Yes.
And then, sort of just what exactly you do would be helpful to know. And then how somebody could support that.
Yes. Can I answer back?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we currently have 7 students who've attended Colorado State University on scholarship, 2 who have gone through graduate school. We have 100% graduation rate and retention rate. And then we scaled back because we realized you just can't worry about kids getting to college. So we have a leadership institute with 60 students from teens in the high schools in Original Aurora, And they just finished doing their first documentary about what it's like to live in Aurora and what they want to change specifically in Aurora. And we've also been involved with policy in creating 3 different laws around victims and advocacy for victims and children.
I've been, followed your story, obviously, excuse me, know your mom, and just have been so proud through the tragedy, could rise so high to your mom become a representative for our state, and for you to lead your family's foundational organization. I think the hardest part is that obviously you're telling your personal story, and you want the world to know how incredible your brother was, like what a great person he was. I would just really work on telling that story. I mean, it's great, but with the knowing your audience, knowing if you only have 5 minutes to tell your story, what parts do you include? Because the personal story is important, but again, I think I'd have to agree that maybe some parts of what it is you're trying to achieve and what that ask is going to be really wasn't clear, only because of time, not because of your lack of being able to ask for it or say it, but I just think that time constraint restricts all of us to know what are the key elements of telling the personal human side of it, and then the ask. So otherwise, great strength in telling your story and representing the legacy of your brother and his fiance.
Thank you.
One thing that I would have found really interesting, and again, it may just have been a function of time, but I wasn't really sure at the end when you talked about it was a story of 2 people. Was it you and your brother, or was it your brother and Robert Ray?
Robert Ray.
That's what I thought. And it would be so interesting if you could build a little more in about him and the opportunities he didn't have when he was growing up. That, I think, would just really, really strongly paint the picture that you were trying to paint.
I just wanted to say that if you can find a way to convey the mission of Fields through the story, because that's what it is. I felt like you was just about to tell me what the mission was. And I feel like as compelling as the story is with your brother and the other person that prompted you to want to launch this effort, if you find a way to weave, the mission of Fields in the story whenever you're telling the story.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maisha. I've heard this story a couple of times. I've heard you tell it a couple of times. I've heard your mom tell it a couple of times. It's the first time I've heard Robert Ray in that story. And I think that there is there's such a disparity between the two that there's something left that came out of that. It's almost like cognitive dissonance. You think, oh, how do these 2 lives come together and create something that's powerful at the end of it for children, in Aurora, and it's kind of an amazing story. But again, it's almost there. It's almost there. Thank you.
I'm still healing. Thank you, Susan. 2005.
And that can be something interesting to mention as well. As even if you say this is 2 stories, and I am only starting to learn the second one. That could be really powerful. I can only tell the first story.
It's very good. I would watch the balance, though, as it relates, again, to what Bev brought up, the mission of your organization. I would be careful of the balance of, well, I don't think your story really glorifies the suspect or the guy that murdered your brother and Vivian, but I think it's a fine balance depending on what you're asking for. Like, you don't want to give too much to him. Like, you're really honoring the legacy of your brother. And that's like the basis, right, for why your organization exists, why you give scholarships in his name. to students. So just, I think it's the balance of those stories. Like I have to do the same and making sure, like I'm not, I might be saying that this doctor killed my grandma, but what am I preserving in that? Just the balance.
That's good.
Can I hear your mission?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Can I hear your mission?
Oh, to ensure every child from 0 to 18 years old has a safe start, a head start, a healthy start, and a fair start in life towards adulthood.
Oh, that's good.
Sure. Well, thanks. And we have some snacks in that same break room that we were in. If you weren't here with us the first time, well, you can just follow the crowd in. And we knew we were going to be a little short on time, and we know you all are short on time in your professional lives all the time, so we didn't want to dominate it. But if you want to stay and continue your stories and continue to talk to each other and continue to make those connections, I mean, we set the food up afterwards for you to continue to do that. So I really hope you all are starting to feel a little connected to each other. Thank you all for sharing stories. We're doing this on purpose. We want you to be connected. We want you all to feel like the first Floodlight users and follow through with this and start to get this thing off the ground. So if that's happening, you don't need to not let that happen. You can be connected to each other and care about each other's stories. I want to ask, because I want to make sure that people feel like whatever they prepared is going to be heard. Do people want some time at the next training to tell their stories? If you want some time at the next training to tell your story, can you raise your hand for me? Yeah, a few of you. Okay, so we'll preserve some time at the beginning. Also, at the next training, I think we're going to get into some more technical details. This was sharing. And then we're going to go into kind of some more of the craft, I think. What can we do to undergird this story? How can we make it most effective? And we kind of just touched the surface of that today, and I think we want to get much more into that. And then by the fourth training, we're going to have you upload these stories onto Floodlight, right? Any of the stories we heard, you have an interview with your mom, or you have a newspaper article about an incident. You have a policy that changed because of something. You have a video clip on your phone that you took while everyone was doing great work or at a celebration. Those are all things that can be useful to help, tell your story, and that Floodlight will be able to handle and bring in. How do you get a newspaper article onto a web-based tool? Well, we'll have to scan it, and then we'll upload it, and that's what we're saying we're going to be available. And we've talked about, well, what if somebody has a newspaper article, but somebody else has a video on their phone, and somebody else has something on YouTube already available? Well, I think we're ready to provide you some technical support. I'm looking at Jordan for this, right? This is accurate. Yeah, we're ready to provide the technical assistance to get all those going, and eventually we do want you to be able to get those onto your stories yourself. But as the first users, we do want to hold your hands and walk you through this and make this the best experience possible for you.
Hi, I'm Jordan Werfsprock, and I work at the Piton Foundation, and I'm product managing Floodlight, so I'm involved a lot in the kind of technical development of the tool. But another resource I want to make sure you guys know we have is John Densler, who was actually here earlier but then had to run off to another meeting, who I think has met several of you. He's working as a story navigator, so he's helping people do things like take photos, take videos, get audio, organize any assets they have, and collect assets and tell stories. So if you would like help with any of that asset gathering, let me know and I will put you in touch with him. He said that he was really sad that he had to leave, but he wanted to make sure that you could get his contact information. So just come find me when we're in the kitchen, and I'll put you in touch with him.
Jordan, can I just add to that? I think all of us would love to hear from you with any questions you have. If you have questions like, what are we doing with this? What's next? Hey, I have this thing. This is what I was hoping to get out of this. I think you certainly have Jordan's email. And please just email us. We'd love to respond and find out what you want from this.
I'll just make one. One final note. I noticed that at the beginning during the question and answer session, there were a lot of questions about what Floodlight is and what it'll be like to actually interact with it. So I'll be around afterwards, and I would love to talk to you more about that, and even maybe show you some demos or some prototypes if you have time. So I would love to talk to you about that.